women.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that introduction, Why. So let's kick off, everyone. Welcome. I'm Katherine Longhi, the Director of Communication here at GIFEW, the Global Institute for Evolving Women. And Why just gave a brilliant introduction to what GIFEW is. So really simply, our mission is transformation of humanity through the aligned power of evolving women. And it is through women working with men that we see as the vehicle for this, and that really there's no time like the present then for us to really start fulfilling in practical action on that mission. So huge acknowledgement and thank you, Why, for joining us today. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in just a moment. But what I wanted to just share this context with all of you in terms of our creation of this webinar. So about a month ago, Why and I had reconnected after a few years we haven't spoken to each other. And I always knew Why. I knew when I met you 3 years ago, I'm like, Why and I are going to do something together. I don't know what it is yet, but I knew we would. And I think this is just the start, actually, of something. And when we were creating it together, we were like, you know, what would be a good idea right now? Like, what would be interesting to people? Like, we were really coming at it from like a head, what I would say like a head approach. Like, we were thinking what would be valuable to people. And in that month that we've been talking and in this creation, what's happened over the last month has been extraordinary and unprecedented. And over the course of this month, as you and I have been continuing to speak, I feel like we've really been grounding, almost like the head kind of meeting, getting closer to the heart. So that's what you can count on, you know, for the next hour, is that we're going to be giving you some really not only head-based ideas, but also some very grounded heart and intuition based activities. And we will be doing something practical and hands-on. So you're gonna love what Why has in store for you. So I'm going to take a pause and come over to you, Why. Start for those of us who've never met you before. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do, and maybe like what had you say yes to my invitation to come and speak today?
Well, first of all, I mean, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to do this as well, because you know, since we've spoken all that time ago, I've been watching your rise through GIFEW as well. So, you know, when we first met and all the kind of things you were doing, you were very passionate about the work that GIFEW was doing, and also your own work as well. And it was obvious that you were going to go somewhere. It's just that it's been brilliant. It's been beautiful to watch as this has been evolving, as the emails start coming through, and as the description at the bottom shows you the higher rank in the organization as it goes over the years. So, you know, one of the reasons why I said yes to this is because I really do agree and believe within the ethos of what GIFEW is trying to get across, and the way in which it's being practiced as well, because I've been watching all the other things that have been going on within that space as well. So it aligns quite nicely with my own, which is a lot to do with making sure that people are centered and as balanced as possible, so that we have our heads and our thinking aligned with our hearts and our feelings. So that's where we get congruent people who are able to go off and take action and make positive contributions to the world. When the opposite is true, when we're thinking one thing but feeling something else, or when we're saying, I really need to get this done, but something inside is stopping us, that's when we're having all the inner conflicts going on. And that's the thing that creates all the states where we get easily drawn by fear, where we get pulled in by doubt and lack of confidence and all those other things, which is where we waste a whole lot of energy doing things that aren't useful. And you know, sometimes those things can even turn out to be quite negative going out into the world. So that's what I'm really focused on doing, helping as many people as possible get aligned and get congruent. And no other complicated explanation apart from getting the way you think and the way you feel to agree with each other. And that's the bottom line. So, which I'm sure you'll agree with. So that's basically where I'm coming from.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so incredible because you just helped me reconnect the dots. When we first met in early 2017, and you were mentoring me about purpose and doing purposeful work. It was through that that I took the first action that was really coming from a head and heart congruent place. And it was the first time I had stepped up my leadership in GIFEW, in terms of, we were running our first ever social change summit. And Bea, our founder, asked volunteers within GIFEW, like, who wants to step up and be a lead ambassador for our social change summit? And my head was like, that is a terrible idea. You need to be finding a job. You need to be focusing on this. You need to be grounded. You need to be stable. My head was like, that is a terrible idea. And my heart was like, you have to do that. Like, shut up, head. You like have to do that. And it was in me declaring myself as a leader inside of that social change summit that was my first experience of doing purposeful work. And it's like, it's just so perfect that you mentioned that. And what are you seeing? So in terms of head and heart alignment, like, we can all agree, right? Like, head and heart alignment sounds good. Sounds like a good idea. What do you see? In this shift that's happened over the last month, do you see that people have a new challenge around that? Or is it actually an old challenge that maybe people are waking up to and getting present to?
That's a good question, and I think it's actually a mixture of both. That's not a way of not answering the question, by the way. Because what happens is we all have those inner conflicts going on, where what we feel and what we think don't always match up. This is where we doubt ourselves, and as I was saying before about confidence issues and being easily drawn in by events going on around us that aren't anything to do with ourselves. Whether it be seeing something on the news and then getting upset about that, or hearing something that somebody said, or somebody says something to you and then you have a big negative reaction to it. I think with the current situation, it's bringing all that stuff up into the forefront. If we weren't paying attention to that stuff before, we don't have a choice now, because because every day we're hearing about things that could potentially be quite frightening. And at the same time, we're quite peaceful in our own homes, so we're not necessarily feeling that fear. So there's a whole lot of stuff about what is going on here. Why am I thinking or feeling like this? And why am I not feeling or thinking like this? So I think this is the ideal time to now start addressing some of those things, some of those incongruences, the misalignments that exist within ourselves, because this current situation has helped bring it all up so that we can pay more attention to it. And we've actually now got a space to do something about it as well, which is amazing.
I know, there's no time like the present. If you've been putting it off, now you can't help but really deal with it. And tell us a little bit more about those incongruences, like the source. Like, what is the source of that? Or is that not even the right question to be asking?
There's the incongruences are basically the result of all the negative things that have happened to us in our lives and all the beliefs and conditioning that we've taken on. That's not to say that it was all such a terrible thing and that it's all wrong. But I think what's happened is we've been taught to try and avoid our feelings for a start, and just try and think our way through problems. We've been instructed and educated very well on how to use our brains and our minds, but we haven't been taught very well how to use our heart or our emotions or our feelings. Those have always been, I don't know about yourself and the other people on the call here, but we've been taught how to read and write and do math and understand science and amazing stuff that the brain can do. But when it came to feelings and emotions and the heart, it'd be, be quiet, stop crying, shut up, you're embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing us, go away, sort yourself out until you feel better and then come back. That's been most people's school of education in that sort of field. And I think what that's led to is now we have a massive imbalance between the two, where we're highly educated here, but in the heart, we're not. So we've got all these highly intelligent people running around acting like emotional 3-year-olds, effectively. and when we know that to be true, but we don't know what to do with it, we're fighting with ourselves. And this is where we use up so much energy battling against stuff that in our heads we know full well doesn't even matter. I don't care what that person said to me 5 years ago, but wait, I do still feel it, but I shouldn't care about it, but I do. If we imagine we took that out of our daily lives, how many years of our life we'd get back.
Yeah, as someone just wrote in the comments, emotions have been on lockdown, only we didn't know it.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Rebecca mentioned there as well about how it's part of our protective impulses. They are. Lots of those reaction patterns happened because we needed protecting from something at the time when that negative, scary event occurred. But we weren't taught what to do with that stuff afterwards. So what we did is we suppressed it, we held on to it. Now we've got protective patterns from when we were 7, when we were 3, when we were at some point when we needed it, when it was absolutely right to have it. But now we're still running with that program, even though we're much more advanced now and more capable and more resourceful. So it's just out of date stuff.
Absolutely. And as Heather says, this old worry energy can be freed up in the present, working on what we actually care about. And I know, I mean, it resonates so much with me, why everything you just said, because I didn't discover my feelings until about 5 years ago, because I had it like feelings are bad. Like I really had it. That's just a fact. Feelings are bad. They are unproductive, unuseful, and you can just think your way through everything. And aren't we just seeing everywhere now when leadership matters the most in times of crisis? Aren't we just seeing, well, a few leaders, and actually they tend to be women, just a coincidence, Prime Minister of Finland, New Zealand, President of Slovakia, a very head and heart aligned leaders, and the type of leadership, it's a type of leadership that cares about others, that takes decisive action, the hard actions, does it in a compassionate way, and leaders who are emotionally acting like 3, maybe 5. I'll give some of them up to 5 years old.
That's generous of you.
I'm being very generous. You know who they are. I don't even need to name names. Yeah. You can just see it.
Yeah.
So like, what can we do practically then? Like, how do we, so for someone like me, take my five-year-old ago, my 35-year-old self, newly discovered, feelings, there's something to it. Like, what's the starting point for working through and getting that head-heart alignment?
Yeah. I think it's so easy with this kind of work to get into very complex ideas. And again, we're going back to the head without even realizing it. We want to work on the heart, but then we study deep into things that might involve a very deep level meditation, understanding philosophy, religion, all those kind of things, which make it very complicated then. And it's very, very difficult to stay in the heart when you're thinking so hard about something. So this goes back to what we were saying earlier, how we can't think our way out of this problem. Because if we did, we'd be sorted out by now. We wouldn't have any issues with ourselves. We'd be fully, utterly 1,000,000% efficient. Right? So
we can feel our way out.
Kind of, yes. What we can actually do is whenever we have a negative response to something, whether it's from fear or whether we find something threatening or we perceive something to be dangerous to ourselves, yet we know in our heads it isn't. What we can actually do is notice. Use our bodies to actually help us find out what that thing is by noticing where you feel it. Because most people, when you feel fear, you're going to get that twist in the gut, or when you feel worried about speaking up and saying something, you'll get that lump in the throat, or you'll get a tension or tightness around your shoulder when you're literally feeling like you're bearing the weight of the world. All these old proverbs we have exist because there is actually a truth in there somewhere, which we still resonate with. Otherwise, we wouldn't use those proverbs anymore. So, but where they've come from is that sort of universal sense that we get when we feel these negative reactions. Now, for different people, you may get them in different places, but they will be consistent for you as a person. So, so for instance, if I were to ask you, if somebody was to come along and slam a report on your desk and say, right, Katherine, you've got 2 hours to get this out to me, and it better be right because this is going up to the board of directors, and if it's wrong, you're fired.
I feel like you just punched me in the gut.
Right. So, and that would be most likely quite a common response you get whenever you're put under pressure and under threat at the same time. So there will be all of us here. I mean, invite everyone on the call at the moment. Think of something where you've had it happen in the past, where you feel under threat, and you feel like something's coming along, pressuring you. And I mean pressure as in something that you feel might be beyond your ability to handle. I just think don't have to feel it right. You don't have to have the real life situation right. Just think back to a time when it happened, and your body will start showing you where that is. It will start showing you a response or a reaction, right? Whether it's your neck and shoulders, whether you feel pressure and tension around your head, right? And Rebecca's saying she feels it in her chest, like someone's sitting on you, you can't breathe. Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah. So our bodies have actually been trying to tell us about this thing forever. But we've been taught that these feelings are dangerous, these things can't be controlled. So what do? We try and avoid that. So we either suppress it and pretend we don't feel it at all, or we try and take ourselves out of the situation or the circumstance so we don't continue to feel it. But it hasn't. But all that we've done is we've just avoided it for a while. Because come that situation, come the next report, like a slam down on your desk, there we go. It's the same thing again. And we actually use a huge amount of our life energy keeping this stuff suppressed and working on trying to avoid situations. Now that old friend who you have had an argument with at some point, and you can't stand each other now. How much effort do you put in to try and avoid them and not turn up in the same places that they turn up at? Or if you're in the same room together, you circle the room away from each other, so you're very aware of where the other person is, but you're putting so much energy into making sure you don't encounter them. That's not feeling the thing. That's using up a lot of energy in order to try and avoid feeling it. So what I'm saying is our bodies have been carrying all this information for us, and every time we feel a negative response that you can tangibly sense, that is your body telling you, hey, there's a reaction pattern over here, deal with it.
Yeah, when you were speaking, when you were pointing out each of the areas, I could act like I just got present to like my own body. Like it was feeling them then, not because I'm having a flight or fight reaction to having this lovely conversation with you, with all of our lovely people here, but because I just was like taken back to those feelings are so familiar, they're almost like automatic, that they can be recreated just by you even verbalizing it.
So that's it. And that's just the beauty of this. And by the way, this isn't a shameless plug yet, because there's nothing, we can't plug it quite yet because I haven't completed the work on this one yet, but there's a system that I've been developing called the reaction code, which is designed to help people spot these things and actually be able to work on it. But the thing is, we carry these reactions with us all the time. In the past, the language that would have been used is this was our emotional baggage. So we're dragging the stuff along with us in this great big case, and then we get to the Ryanair counter and we've got to pay an extra £120. Well, actually, right now you don't because they're all grounded. But anyway, but apart from that, yeah. So that's the bad news. But the great news is, because we carry it around with us all the time, we can access it anytime we want. We don't have to wait until the horrible thing happens in order to deal with it. So just like we were saying now, so you gave a perfect example. You don't really have the boss breathing down your neck and putting the reports on your desk, but just thinking about that allowed your body to access where that reaction pattern is. And there's a lot more behind all of this stuff, but in the simplest terms, in a way where it can be made practical and that anybody can use these sort of tools, that's all we need to think of. The fact that if you think of something and it brings up a feeling somewhere and you notice a reaction in your body, then one, you've definitely got something there, and two, you already know where it is. The only third bit is then to do something about it, which as I understand, we're going to do that a little bit later on, further into the call, and get everyone to work on one of these patterns. And yeah, it's going to be different. It's not going to work the same ever again.
Well, funny you should mention, because Maud has just asked us, if I get this feeling of pressure in my chest or gut, what can I do to get rid of it? So perhaps, should we go there next?
We'll go there in a little bit. Let's say for more, just to hang on to that one for a moment. Don't sit there feeling it all the time, but remember what you thought of to get that reaction, and then we'll come back to that in a short while. If that's okay.
You can see my head like trying to accelerate.
Yeah. Well,
my head is like accelerating.
Well, that's the one thing that we do know about you. You're very go-getting. You just want to get there, and so, which is again another one of the reasons why I said yes to this, because that attitude of, well, if we've got something, let's make it practical, let's get it out to people, let's get it done, let's make it something that's useful. And I think that's really, really important, because there's 101 ways of dealing with this particular issue we're talking about head and heart misalignment, and most of them probably work. People have had great experiences with them. I've just found that some of them tend to be quite complex and can take a long time to learn. So I made it my business to try and simplify it as much as possible to something that I could literally hand a sheet over to a 10-year-old, or actually in this case I did it to a 6-year-old, my son. I actually showed it that, look, this is what you need to do, follow that, and he does it. And he does it now. So
wow, that's
the
so
easier,
great.
yeah. So some of the most powerful tools that we have available to us are actually really simple. We've just gone back up here and overcomplicated them again.
So what other context do you think, for someone embarking on, for someone deciding, I get it, like I have these feelings, they turn up in my body. If that's the access, like it sounds like that's the access for transformation.
Yeah.
Which could be new to some people out there. So before we embark on an exercise, what other context do you think is important for people to understand, before we go into the practical?
Well, I think for context, it's whenever we get something like this happen, as I mentioned earlier on, we're using up a lot of energy to suppress that, to run away from that, to avoid it, or to just get swept up in it. That happens as well. We just have a good old cry over it, or get really upset and break something and think, well, that's that over with. Well, yeah, until it comes back again next time. So what we're looking at is actually almost like disassembling that pattern so that we can almost like return it from where it came from, which is from us in the first place. Our own awareness created this to protect us. So that's a little bit of background on where it's kind of coming from. In terms of ordinary context, this will apply whenever you run into something where you don't feel comfortable. There's a discomfort. It doesn't matter the level of discomfort, because some things that we think are small, later on in life, we find that actually that's a huge, massive thing that's been sitting around with us. And one of my clients who's not here today at the moment because she's busy doing something else, but just recently, she's been doing a lot of exploration within herself and a lot of work, and gone to lots of places to take on all the different courses, and has been working with me for quite a long time now as well. And it was only just last week when we were talking about it, she realized that boyfriend, do you remember that boyfriend we were talking about several years ago? Okay, yeah. It turned out that she thought that was such a little thing now, but actually what it did was it triggered this whole feeling of non-worthiness within her. And that persisted all the way through. And she didn't think that was a big deal. When she thought of that guy, every now and then she'd get a little bit angry, but that wasn't a big thing. But actually it turns out it was. So these feelings that we get, we work with the big ones, because those are the ones that concern us the most, but they may not always be the most important ones. So part of the context is to help people to get used to doing this work. So whenever they notice something, doesn't matter how small or how tiny, work with that so that you can start clearing out that baggage. And as soon as, could you imagine if it is like an airline case, full stuffed to the gills with all your old doubts and worries and fears and
all your old boyfriends
and all your old boyfriends, exactly. And you had to jump on top of the case in order to be able to zip the thing up, right? As you start taking stuff out of there, I'm not going to mention what kind of things you might want to take out of your holiday baggage after you get back. Let's not go there. But as you're taking stuff out, you're actually giving yourself more space and room in there. The bags are lighter, so you as a person are lighter. And the more stuff you clear out of there, the more room you've got to then fully organize things. And this is where you can start targeting things more specifically. But initially, it'll be a case of, I just want to feel better. I just don't want to feel all this kind of stuff anymore. So use it. So the thing is, you use it on anything that you find, initially just to play with it.
I like this analogy of the luggage. In GIFEW, we talk often about frozen energy,
Right.
and releasing frozen energy. But I like this suitcase. If we go to this suitcase analogy, if we have the ability to free up space, will we automatically put more stuff in that space, or will it continue to stay more spacious?
I think, as far as I'm aware, it's probably impossible to clear it out 100% completely. I haven't spoken to him, but I'm sure if I brought the Dalai Lama on here right now, he'd say, "Yeah, I've still got this, and this to work on." But what happens is, it isn't so much a case of emptying out the whole lot. I think more importantly, I mean, that is part of it, so that you can have more space to function as a person. But I think the most important part is to understand and know how to do this, so that when you do get new things coming up, you can then work with those as well. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this too much, but a lot of the reactions that you or I might have right now with things, they are the same reactions that we've had since the first time this thing started. So, for instance, I don't know, obviously we don't necessarily have a problem with public speaking, but say, for instance, if we were, and we have fear and we get the cold sweats, and once upon a time I did have all the cold sweats and trembling and red face, everything like that. That reaction may have come back from when we were children, and what's happening is that's being repeated over and over and over and over again. So what happens is, if we worked on that particular pattern, that would disassemble that, and it would also take that away from all the other contexts where it occurs as well. So it might be, you might have public speaking in front of people you don't know, public speaking in front of people you do know, or speaking up about something that's really dear and important to you, which is much harder than going off and selling something that belongs to somebody else. That's easy in comparison to something that's really important to you. But all of those contexts will contain the same reaction pattern. So if we work on that reaction pattern in one context, it also takes it away from the other ones as well. So we're disassembling it for, like, you've played Jenga?
Yeah. Love Jenga.
Yeah. Well, this is the opposite of Jenga. We're trying to pull the one out that will collapse the whole lot, rather than trying to pull one out gently and leave the whole tower in place.
That's awesome. I like this resonates so much with me, because I so try, like, even in my own practice of your work, I want I want so badly to understand it. They're like, what happened to me when I was 3 years old? They're like, what exactly? He said this, she said that, I made it mean blah, blah, blah. Like, I just naturally want to go there. And we had this beautiful question come in from the Facebook chat, which I'd love to ask you, which is feelings and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, different, and how do we distinguish between them, and what are we going to work on with our hearts?
With regard to feelings and emotions, are often interchangeable. Emotions are when, I think we get to call them emotions when we are starting to come back up here and we're trying to cubbyhole it and put it all together in a package that looks sensible, that makes sense to the mind. Feelings are just what happens. You walk into a room full of people, you don't know any of them, and suddenly you get this feeling come over you, like everyone's staring at you, and you don't want them to. What emotion do we label that as? Is it a confidence thing? Is it a fear thing? Is it there's so many things that it could be, and there's probably all of those things if we were to go down the route of trying to label them all. But from my perspective, the easiest thing to do is treat it just as the feeling. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel that thing, then that is exactly what it is. That's exactly what your body's showing you, not necessarily what your mind has then translated that into meaning and then applying labels
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
So again, further simple, just to make it even simpler, if you feel that thing, just run with that, rather than
Mm.
trying to make it mean something. The,
Yeah. So we're
the,
not dealing with angry, frustrated, sad, happy. We're dealing with, oh, like I have a sensation
yeah,
somewhere
yeah. Because of
here.
course your definition of angry compared to my definition of angry. I mean, anger is an easier one. It's easier to sort of spot that. But if we start talking about doubt, your definition of doubt and my definition of doubt is going to be different. And most of us will probably have so many nuances in there that all our definitions are different. So if we look to psychology, what Jung might have said about that would be different from what Freud said about that, would have been different from. So there's no one single label that applies to somebody completely, which I think is where we can sweep all that stuff aside and just work with, right, where am I noticing this thing? Where am I feeling it?
Brilliant. And Heather agrees that a lot has arisen for her in the past few weeks, hopefully to be released and healed. And some things seem little, but could also be important,
Yeah.
as you
And
said.
there's I mean, little is always, even little things are really important. There's a psychology professor in Canada who's talking about how if you were just to adjust 1% per day, nothing more, don't go any further, don't try and change yourself all over. 1% per day, you end up with 365% improvement in a year. And that's only if you did 1%. If you did even less than that, all those tiny things is more the consistency to keep it up is the important part, because you build upon that and build upon that, 0.25%. I'm not going to do the maths here. That's not my thing. But
Or how about 2%? If you did 2% a day.
there you go again, Catherine. You're doing it again. For
700
anybody
and
else.
something percent. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so even the tiny little things can actually ultimately go to make a big difference. But the thing is, even the tiny things, we don't necessarily know how important they really are. Yeah, it could be a minor thing that would appear to have nothing to do with the problem you've got in front of you. So trust that your awareness, your body, your whole system brought that to you for a reason. And that's not even getting woo woo, although I can go there if we want. It's not even just about being woo woo. There's a reason why your body showed you that reaction compared to another one. And that has to be because this particular one is the most relevant according to your greater inner wisdom and your consciousness and your greater knowledge. That says, work on this one. I'm going to show you this one because this is the important one for this moment in time. Yeah. So
Brilliant.
now, shall we just go and do this?
Yay.
I know you've been holding it back all this time.
I wasn't going to ask again. I was going to wait for you to get there in your own time.
Okay. As I said, the important thing is just to play with it. Because if you get too serious about it, you've popped back up here again. So we just want to it's not that the mind isn't useful, of course it is, otherwise we wouldn't have it. But we do need that combination of working with the heart and the mind. And in this sense of what we're doing here, if we think of the heart just purely as that which shows us the feeling. There's a lot of deeper, more accurate, and more powerful descriptions of what the heart and the field of the heart and the heart space mean. But for just for now, we're just looking at that which shows you the rest of the stuff that isn't thoughts. Okay. So if everyone's up for doing this, and if you can just put in the chat box, yes, just type in yes or something to words to that effect.
You already got yeses.
Okay.
And absolutelys and yeses.
Right.
And yeses with exclamations.
There we go. So what we'll invite everyone to do then is think of something that's causing you discomfort right now. And we're talking about the current situation that we're in. You know, there's lots of things going on. We're not quite sure what's going to happen tomorrow. We're not sure what's going to turn up in the news that's going to change the way we feel or think about ourselves, the world around us, the future, all of that kind of stuff. Hope I'm helping everyone get there by mentioning it.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. But just for a moment, just think about the things that cause that kind of doubt or fear, and allow yourself just to feel it for a moment. It doesn't matter if it's slight or if it's heavy. Just allow it to be for a moment, just to be with it. And with this particular one, what you'll typically notice is you're going to feel some sort of pressure, something that's either a tightness or something that's all around you.
Getting myself,
Yeah.
like, feeling.
Yeah. Like Rebecca mentioned earlier, maybe it's a pressure in the chest, or as Maud mentioned, there's, that kind of tension. Just allow yourself to notice it for a moment. And then just imagine that tension, that pressure is being held in by a bubble that's surrounding you. Because a bubble that's creating this pressure. That's how your body is able to sense it. Then just take your imagination for a moment and then just reach right out for the edge of that bubble. Now it could
Should we be closing our eyes here?
You can if you like. Yeah, if you feel it's going to be useful, you can close your eyes. If you can do it just doing 1,000-yard stare in front of the screen, do that as well. It's whatever is most useful for you. So take your imagination, take your attention, and reach right out for the inside edge of that bubble. Remember, you're inside this bubble. So you're reaching for the edge of it, and just allow yourself to notice when you get to the edge. It might be a couple of feet away, it might be a mile away, it could be on the other side of the planet. And you don't need to worry about whether you've definitely got the right edge or not. If you're reaching with your imagination, then you feel like, actually, I don't feel like reaching any further. That's it. That's already your body telling you you've got there. And then from there, notice that beyond the edge of that bubble, there's a great big open expanse of space, like a big kind of like emptiness. And then just allow yourself to go out into that expansive space. Just teleport through the bubble. You don't need to pop anything or break anything or do anything drastic. Just allow yourself to be on the other side. And then from there, just carry on moving out and out and out, further into that expansive space, further away from the bubble. If you feel like you're having trouble getting away from the bubble, untie any sort of connection that you might have to it. There may be a string, a cord, something that your imagination creates to represent being tied to it. Just unravel that and carry on out into the expanse of space. And just keep going and going and going and going until space is all that you've got in your awareness, apart from me speaking. And then just bring your attention back to where we are now. And think again about exactly what I was talking about the situation that's out there at the moment, your concerns about what might be happening in the future, whether something's going to suddenly turn up in the news tomorrow and change the way you think or feel about yourself or the future, or what's going to happen. Or whichever subject matter you picked earlier on to get that feeling, use exactly the same one. And just notice how you feel about it now. And
For
how do we
me,
feel about it now? Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. Rise check feels lifted, and for me, my worry and concern I have is my husband and I working at home together. And he actually came through that door, and I put up I have strategically positioned myself so that he would not disrupt our call, but it's a real concern for me. And where it was showing up was my whole upper back, neck, shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry if I had a bit of a weird dazed expression, because I was going through like rather than going through outside of the screen,
Mhm.
that bubble, I was
Mhm.
going into the screen through that bubble. And yeah, when I got to nothing, it was like my whole posture, it was like I just noticed my whole posture had shifted.
Yeah.
And it was light. Um, light
Brilliant.
light and
Yeah.
free. Then a
Yeah.
new pattern appeared somewhere else, but I'm not going to go into that.
Well, that is something that can happen. You clear one, and then the next one shows up. It doesn't mean you have to deal with it there and then, but it's almost like the word goes through the grapevine inside of your awareness, and people and all these different patterns start hearing, wait a minute, there's a way out of here? You mean we don't have to keep doing this cruddy old job that we've been doing for Catherine for the last however many years? Quick, sign me up. Where's the queue for that? Um, Interestingly enough, I just seen on the chat that quite a few people said they feel much lighter, which is perfect because it was that pressure that actually makes you feel weighed down. Again, and all these different analogies that we have and all these different sayings we have because they have a real resonance. And another brilliant one that Rodney said, he asked, "Am I me?" The will,
Oh,
yeah,
I think
the
he thought I was saying his name because there's someone called Razik who's feeling
yeah, Razik.
lifted, and I
Oh,
think Rodney might have
oh,
thought.
was he? Oh, okay. Anyway, well, it's good that that came up anyway, because what can happen is once you've done this exercise, or once you've done more of these exercises, you you don't necessarily feel like you, because you've been so used to having that tension, so used to having that stress, so used to having that pressure. Immediately afterwards, you can sometimes feel a little off balance, because it's like if you imagine you've been pushing up against an obstacle, and then suddenly the obstacle's gone, but you're still pushing up against it, so you kind of lose your balance for a couple of seconds, and then afterwards, like, hang on, where'd the wall go? Where'd the limitation go? So there can be a little bit of a feeling like that, but what happens is, as you get more accustomed to that, that is the more aligned version of yourself. That is the version of yourself that is thinking and feeling in congruence. Your thoughts and your feelings, your mind and your heart agree in that space. So there's no more tension. There's no more push and pull going on.
And Heather reports breathing easier.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
this, the coronavirus is a metal lung disease.
Yeah.
So that's very powerful. And Karen feels calm and has faith and trust in life. Joanne feels she's been untethered, freed. Oh, Barbara. Okay, you're Barbara. I say, okay, that makes sense. Dee had pressure, is what she felt. Joanne says a more aligned version of self. And Maud, yeah, I think this, don't worry, Maud, this is, you're probably in the boat with others as well. Didn't feel like she got rid of the feeling
Mm-hmm.
and was able to objectify it and put it at a distance, which gave her a space to examine.
Oh,
And
oh,
she
can I
wonders
just?
if she's going into her head again. What do you think?
Well, I want to just address that one. What can sometimes happen is back to the example of public speaking, for instance. Underneath that one, the feeling that we get, there may have been people might laugh at me. There might have been a last time I did this, horrible things happened, or I might forget what I'm going to say, or I'm going to say something and there's going to be dead silence. My joke will not have landed, or people afterwards will think that I'm stupid. That's already 5 different things that are all happening underneath that one feeling. So what can sometimes happen is these reactions, as I call them, these reaction patterns, you can get multiple patterns underneath the same context. So what will often happen is when you work on one thing, you may not get rid of the feeling completely because there's still more under there. And the reason why you can still feel it is your body is telling you, look, you're not finished. There's still more to do here. But what you will notice is the feeling won't be exactly the same as it was before. It's very, very difficult to get it back exactly the same way. So it might be a tiny bit lighter. It might be in a slightly different location. It might have a different sense of pressure to it. And all of those things are actually clues to let you know that that's not exactly the same one, but that there are still other patterns in that same location. because there are only so many locations that we have that we can park this stuff. It's like a car park. There's the same car park, which might be the pressure in the chest, and there's lots of cars parked in there, but you've just got rid of the blue Fords and the and the red Volvos, but there's still a whole bunch of other ones in there. So that's really, really good.
Rodney asks, how does it work with your son?
I just tell them, notice where you feel the thing and then do the technique.
Oh man, so what a lucky son.
Well, I mean, as a result, he's probably one of the more confident kids of his age, and not as in belligerent, overcompensating confident, but just actually completely okay within himself. And he's probably listening to this now. I can imagine his head exploding right now, his growing, his ego going off. But again, there's so many things that he can easily get through, so many challenges he can easily get through, that we see his peers and his friends struggling with. And it isn't because he's the hardest working kid or he studies hardest and all that kind of stuff, but he uses up less energy to do things, so therefore he's got more capacity to do other things, which is,
don't we all want that these days?
Yeah, and which is ultimately, I mean, when we first met, well, I'll be careful not to tell too much of your story that you're not telling yourself, but because you had just come from an executive role, and you had been an HR director, I think it was, wasn't it? And we see this a lot with people in executive roles, where you get to the point where you kind of outgrow the career, and then you sort of feel like, wait a minute, I've got to just do something that's a bit more purposeful before I get too old, before there's no time left to actually do that. And a lot of that stuff, when we feel that, I mean, I'm sure all of us have had that kind of sense at some point that we need to do something more in our lives, or there must be more to it than just clocking in 9 to 5 or filling out reports or whatever it is that we're all doing on a day-to-day basis. But then we get those same pressures that come in like, oh no, I can't do it. Or what will people think about me if I try to do that? What if the thing that I go on to do won't pay the bills anymore? And all those same kind of things. And those reactions come up. And they stop us dead. And we carry on going along, doing the thing that we don't want to do anymore for a few more years, thinking, oh, I'll change it next year, I'll change it next year. So the more we recognize that those pressures, those feelings are there, and the more we realize that that's the thing that's actually stopping us from doing what we really want to be doing, and then deal with it, the greater the chance and likelihood that we will actually start moving forward into doing what we really want to do, which I'd like to think you're in that direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I've made tremendous strides over the last 3 years working with you to really fulfill on doing purposeful work. And actually, not ironically, it's now that everything's really coming to fruition.
Yeah.
Because of the shift. It's like I no longer cannot do it. Yeah. Because it's like an imperative now. Yeah. And it's the timing.
Yeah, and the things that we're putting on the brakes. I mean, there's another analogy that one of my teachers used to use. It's like saying you've got your foot on the accelerator and your foot on the brake at the same time. As then these reaction patterns we're talking about, these feelings, the tensions, the pressures, and so on, that's the brakes. Those are the brakes. So as you ease off those, even if you take a little bit of pressure off, you get more forward momentum. You get more of that energy is used to go forwards.
And your son is like the perfect poster child. Like you just explaining like how he operates is actually like the poster child of this work and shows it works. So how would you recommend, like, how can people take forward this exercise that you've given them today? Like, how would you recommend people put it into practice and get into a rhythm?
Well, the best way right now, from what little we've spoken about of it, obviously there's more to it than this, but in terms of what we talked about today, there's already enough to start playing with it. And that's the thing, just to play with it, just to actually apply it and be okay if the thing you're working on doesn't seem to work the way you wanted it to, or you haven't completely cleared it, as Maud said earlier on, you haven't completely cleared the pattern. Just carry on playing with it and noticing the differences. Because that's how, like a kid, you give a kid a toy, they don't know exactly what it's supposed to do and how it works, but they'll play with it. And as they play with it, they quickly become the expert on it. And then before you know it, they're explaining to us how the thing works. And we're the ones that read the instruction manual, but they're the ones that played with it. So,
Yeah.
so playing with it
And
is so much more important. You can learn so much more than reading all the instruction manuals. So I think for
yeah.
people going forward, just from what we've talked about here today, the most useful thing is to just play around with it. And of course, if you have any questions about it, you can get hold of me, get in touch with me.
Yeah. And for people who want to play, so I mean, what you've given us today is like, of the toolbox, you've given us a tool
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
toolbox.
Mhm.
For those here today who want to actually go deeper to have a rhythm, a structure of doing that exercise and more exercises, what's the practical way that they can get in touch with you, connect with you?
Well, one of the really important things is, first of all, we all have issues and we all have problems, but it's really important to work out what it is that we're here to do. The thing that really lights us up, that purpose. Right, so you can have as much skill and ability as you like, but without clarity on that purpose, it's really difficult to know what to work on.
Mm,
As we know, well, we have so many different reactions over so many different things. So one of the things is to actually bring focus and clarity into what it is that we're actually wanting to change these things for.
yeah.
And quite often it won't necessarily be what we think we want. So, I mean, for the people on listening to us at the moment and listening either live or on the recording, if you're the kind of person who sort of feels like there is more that you want to do in your life, and there's more that you need to achieve, but yet at the same time you've got your own internal obstacles. You might have, you've got the resources, the capability, and all this kind of thing to get those things done, but somehow it's not happening. Then what I do recommend is the session that I run called the Uncover Your Meaningful Work-Life Breakthrough session is one where, go on.
I've just put the link in the
Oh,
chat.
brilliant, brilliant. Yeah. What happens in that session is for all the people who are on the webinar now, I'll make it available as a free session. So for people who is actually part of their program, this probably comes up to about like somewhere between 150, 200 pounds for the session. But what it does is through the course of the session, it's three main questions that I ask. It's just the way in which we ask it. And it's a process that I've learned, so I can wax lyrical about how brilliant and great it is because I don't have to worry about me having created it. But I've done this.
I've done it twice,
Yeah,
so I can
yeah,
highly recommend it.
yeah. So what happens is through the course of that session, which is an hour session, we clarify the sense of direction for yourself. We identify the main obstacle that's getting you stuck, and then we identify the most powerful actions that will then propel you forward in your life. And every single time I've done this, which is hundreds and hundreds of times now, we get the result at the end of it. And having that will then give more of a context in why you want to be shifting and changing these things. Yeah. So what I recommend for people, if that sounds like it's something that's going to be useful for you, and you're somebody who's action orientated, that you want to do things, you want to roll your sleeves up and actually get stuff done. And especially now, while we've got the space and the time to do it, because the whole world is going to it's frozen at the moment. So, I can't think of any other better time in life where we've had that clear space to be able to breathe and work on ourselves. But if you're the type of person who's actually likely to push forward and use this fully, then I recommend you go to the link that's on there and all you need to do is click on the link. It will take you to a calendar. You pick the appointment, and then once you've got that, you'll get the confirmation come through, and you'll get a link to a questionnaire, which you have to fill in on the questionnaire as well, because that helps us to be able to hit the ground running and be able to focus on the session. But the main thing behind this is the more people that I can get, or I can help to have clarity on what it is they're trying to do, the more they can then focus their energy, their efforts, all their attempts at helping themselves in that direction. So it gives that context, it gives that focus, which is much easier to work towards than if we're just doing it randomly on, you know, any possible thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the
You,
day, we might end up with more world-changing people out there, which is my intention.
you've had 5 testimonials on the chat saying, yes, highly valuable. Do it, book it. And I just wanted to add a further context, which is, you know, if you came to this call today, you know, in survival or okay, like some of you did, and you were just like, I just want to be okay. And what Y has just shared may seem a little bit scary or a bit like, oh, those questions are kind of like the big questions. I'm not sure I have the luxury of those questions. Think of it like an evolutionary imperative. We need all of us to be asking ourselves these questions and acting on it, because we are the ones that are going to get us out of this crisis. No one else is coming. It is us. And as you've seen from the testimonials, including my own, we can all recommend. It's an awesome session. So is there anything else that you'd love to say to us today that I've missed, that I haven't asked you?
Well, I think we initially had a plan for this session, and then it changed completely with the whole world changing completely around us. I think the only thing I want to add to this then is, and this is going to sound a little bit cliched and almost like slightly podium preaching, but this is just my thing, that, you know, all of us have great potential within ourselves, and we know this because otherwise we wouldn't call it potential. We would call it things you can never have, but they don't. We call that our potential, and the only reason that we haven't managed to strive rapidly towards our potential, or in most cases even surpass what we thought was our potential and then open up a new horizon of potentials, is because we've got these things holding us back internally. You know, we've got this inner conflict. We're thinking one thing, feeling something else. We're feeling something else and trying to think of another thing and trying to avoid it and suppress it and so on. And that's what's actually stopping us from becoming the most powerful versions of ourselves that we can be. And it's actually fairly simple, you know, straightforward. We don't have to get too much into the spiritual side of things, although what happens is it can open up more sense of that, but we don't have to get into all of that in order to actually start making shifts to help us move towards that potential and push the boundaries on that. And if every single person in the world was doing something like this, we wouldn't have anywhere near the kind of problems that we have now.
Exactly. So with that, because I think that is the perfect place to end, I want to, on behalf of everyone here, thank you, Y, and acknowledge you for your incredible wisdom. I want to acknowledge all of you for being here today, to take an hour out of your Friday afternoon to really inquire with us and look here. And also, I got your acknowledgement of me, so thank you. And that's all there is. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
Bye.